Aaliyah's small hands trembled slightly as she stepped onto the polished marble floor of the city bank. Her heart beat faster with every step, and she clutched the folded check in her pocket like a treasure. It was her first big deposit, the result of months of hard work, helping neighbors with chores, tutoring younger kids, and saving every penny she earned. To anyone else it might have seemed like a tiny, insignificant amount, but to Aaliyah it meant everything. It was proof that she could work hard, save, and achieve something on her own. The bank was quiet, with a faint hum of computers and the soft rustle of papers. Aaliyah looked around nervously, her eyes meeting the polished uniforms of the staff and the glossy counters. She felt small in the vast space, but she straightened her back and reminded herself why she was here. Today she would deposit her check, and she would do it with pride. At the counter stood Mr. Thompson, the bank manager. He was a tall man with a stern face, graying hair, and a sharp gaze that seemed to miss nothing. He looked up as Aaliyah approached, and the moment his eyes met hers, a smirk appeared on his face. "Well, well," he said in a low, mocking tone. "What do we have here? A little girl with a check?" Aaliyah paused for a moment, her throat tightening. She had been told to expect polite smiles and maybe a few questions. Not this, not laughter. She forced a polite smile and extended her hand with the check. I'd like to deposit this, please," she said softly. Mr. Thompson took the check from her hands, turning it over and squinting at the amount. Then he laughed, a short, sharp laugh that echoed across the bank hall. "You expect me to process this? This tiny little check? Are you sure you know what you're doing?" His words were not just dismissive. They carried a weight of mockery that made Aaliyah's stomach twist. Her cheeks burned and she looked down, wishing she could disappear. Every nerve in her body told her to turn around and run, but she stayed. She had worked too hard to be scared away by one man's arrogance. She took a deep breath and held her head high, even as Mr. Thompson chuckled quietly and muttered to himself. Other customers glanced over, some smirking, others with faint curiosity. Aaliyah felt their eyes, and a wave of embarrassment washed over her. But beneath it, a spark of determination burned. She reminded herself that this check was not just a piece of paper. It was proof of her effort, her patience, and her courage. It was her hard work made tangible, and no one had the right to belittle it. Mr. Thompson finally tore his eyes away from the check and looked at her, still smirking. "Well," he said slowly, "I suppose I can process this. But don't get your hopes up too high. It's just a small check." Aaliyah's hands clenched into fists for a brief second, but she forced herself to smile again. She nodded politely. "Thank you," she said softly. Her voice might have been quiet, but it carried a strength she didn't yet realize she possessed. As she waited for the transaction, Aaliyah's mind wandered to all the hours she had spent saving this money. She remembered carrying groceries for neighbors, tutoring little kids after school, and skipping treats she wanted to save every cent. Each sacrifice had built this moment. And no matter what the manager thought, she knew her effort mattered. Her heart still pounded when she finally received the receipt. She clutched it tightly like a victory banner. She had done it. She had faced a mocking world and survived it. And though she didn't know it yet, the real test, the one that would change her life, was about to begin. Aaliyah stepped back from the counter, clutching the receipt tightly in her small hands. She wanted to feel proud, but the sting of the manager's laughter clung to her like a shadow. Her chest felt heavy and her throat burned. How could someone look at her so little, so insignificant, when she had worked so hard for this? She swallowed the lump in her throat and tried to walk with confidence, but her steps felt fragile, almost unsteady. Around her, the bank continued its quiet hum. Customers shuffled through the lines, some sneaking glances at the scene she had just endured. Aaliyah felt their eyes like tiny knives, some sharp with curiosity, others with judgment. She imagined what they might be thinking. Who does she think she is? Why even bother with such a small check? The imagined words hurt almost as much as the real ones. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of the hours she had spent earning that money. Every chore, every tutoring session, every careful saving, none of it was small to her. She had counted each dollar she earned, celebrated every penny saved. This check represented courage, persistence, and her determination to make something of herself. And yet, Mr. Thompson's laughter tried to erase all that effort in a single cruel moment. Aaliyah glanced at the manager again. He was busy with other paperwork, barely giving her a glance. His smirk still lingered on his face, as if he had already forgotten the young girl who dared to stand before him. Anger bubbled inside her chest, mingling with embarrassment. How dare he treat her this way? She had nothing to give him except respect, and he had tossed it aside like it was worthless. Tears threatened to spill, but Aaliyah blinked them back. She had been taught to face the world with strength, not weakness. She straightened her shoulders, took a step forward, and whispered to herself, "I am worth more than this. I worked too hard to let him make me feel small." The words felt like a shield, protecting her from the sting of humiliation, even if only slightly. Her mind wandered back to her mother, Mrs. Carter, who had always encouraged her to work hard and stand tall. She remembered the evenings when her mother would sit with her, helping her balance her small savings, praising her for every bit of effort. Mom would be proud of me, Aaliyah thought. That thought gave her a small flicker of comfort in the cold, polished bank hall. Even as she tried to steady herself, Aaliyah couldn't help but notice the looks from other customers. A few faces softened with pity, some whispered quietly to one another, and a couple even offered her sympathetic smiles. She felt a strange mix of shame and reassurance. Shame for being mocked in public, but reassurance that not everyone was cruel, that some people still saw effort and determination as valuable. Mr. Thompson finally returned, holding the processed check and the receipt. "Here," he said with a half-smile, almost dismissively. "Your transaction is complete." His tone was polite, but there was still an undercurrent of condescension. Aaliyah nodded, said a quiet "thank you," and turned to leave. As she walked toward the exit, a thought lingered in her mind. This world could be cruel and unkind, but she could not let that cruelty define her. She would not let laughter or doubt from others diminish her efforts. Each step toward the door was a step toward proving herself, not to Mr. Thompson, not to the customers, but to herself. Her heart pounded not only with lingering embarrassment, but also with determination. She knew this was just the beginning of a journey, one where respect and recognition might not come easily. But Aaliyah understood one important truth. She had the courage to face the world even when it laughed at her dreams. And deep inside, a quiet fire began to grow. A fire that would not be extinguished by mockery or doubt. Aaliyah's footsteps echoed softly against the polished marble floor as she moved toward the bank's exit. She tried to hold her head high, but the sting of humiliation still clung to her like a shadow. Her small hand still gripped the receipt tightly, as if it could protect her from the memory of Mr. Thompson's laughter. She felt exhausted, not from physical effort, but from the weight of embarrassment pressing down on her chest. Just as she reached the doors, the heavy glass swung open with a sudden push. A woman walked in, and immediately the entire energy of the bank shifted. She was tall, confident, and elegant, dressed in a simple yet commanding way that made heads turn. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, scanned the room like they could see everything. Even from across the hall, Aaliyah felt her mother's presence. It was magnetic, undeniable. The woman's gaze fell on the bank manager, Mr. Thompson, who was just finishing some paperwork behind the counter. The smirk that had haunted Aaliyah's morning vanished the moment their eyes met. The woman spoke, her voice calm but filled with authority. "Mr. Thompson, I believe you've been entertaining yourself at my daughter's expense." The bank manager froze. His face went pale, and for the first time that morning, the confident smirk disappeared. There was a quiet tension in the air, a moment where time seemed to slow. Aaliyah turned back, her eyes widening as she recognized her mother. Relief and awe mixed with nervous anticipation. Her mother's presence was like a shield, instantly making her feel safer, stronger. Mrs. Carter walked toward the counter, her steps steady and unwavering. She reached her daughter and gently took Aaliyah's small hand in hers. The warmth of her touch made Aaliyah's heart swell. She looked up at her mother, eyes shining with gratitude, but her mother's sharp gaze never left Mr. Thompson. "You see this young lady?" Mrs. Carter said, her tone calm but firm. "She worked hard for every cent of that check. Every chore she did, every hour she spent tutoring others, every bit of effort she poured in. This is the result. And you," she looked directly at the manager, her eyes steady, chose to laugh at her. Mr. Thompson opened his mouth, but no words came out. He shifted uncomfortably under the weight of her gaze. There was a moment of silence, thick and heavy, where the noise of the bank seemed to fade into the background. Aaliyah felt her mother's hand squeeze hers gently, a silent reassurance that she was not alone, that she had never been alone. Aaliyah's heart began to beat faster, but this time it was not fear, it was a mix of pride and hope. She realized her mother's presence changed everything. The man who had laughed at her seemed smaller now, his arrogance no match for the quiet strength standing before him. Mrs. Carter's voice softened slightly, though it still carried authority. "Aaliyah's effort is valuable. Her perseverance is admirable, and respect should never be denied, especially not to someone who has earned it with hard work." She turned her gaze back to her daughter, smiling warmly. "I am proud of you, my child. You faced him with courage, and that is something no one can take from you." Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness this time, but of relief and gratitude. The tension in her chest eased slightly, replaced by a deep warmth. She had felt small, belittled, and humiliated, but now with her mother by her side, she felt seen, respected, and strong. The customers around the bank had begun to notice. Whispers floated through the air, a mixture of surprise and admiration. Some nodded at Aaliyah in silent support as if acknowledging her courage. The balance had shifted. What had begun as a moment of humiliation was transforming into a moment of recognition, a turning point that would mark the beginning of a new chapter in Aaliyah's life. Mr. Thompson swallowed hard, his face now a mask of discomfort. For the first time he seemed aware of the consequences of his arrogance. And Aaliyah, standing beside her mother, felt a quiet satisfaction blossom inside her, a small, powerful seed of triumph that would only grow stronger from this moment onward. Mr. Thompson's hands trembled slightly as he straightened behind the counter. For the first time that morning he looked small, not the confident, smirking bank manager who had laughed at a young girl's check, but a man confronted by the consequences of his arrogance. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. Every polite word he had rehearsed seemed to vanish under the weight of Mrs. Carter's calm, unwavering gaze. Mrs. Carter took a slow step closer, her presence filling the space between them. "Do you understand what you did, Mr. Thompson?" she asked gently, though there was steel beneath her words. "You laughed at my daughter. You made her feel small, insignificant, like her effort meant nothing. But let me tell you something. You are wrong." Aaliyah stood beside her mother, gripping her hand tightly. She felt a mix of fear and courage swirling inside her. Fear of the tension in the room and courage from the quiet pride she drew from her mother. She lifted her chin slightly, meeting the bank manager's eyes, though her voice remained soft. "I worked hard for that check," she said. "Every hour, every chore, every bit of saving, it's mine. I earned it." The bank manager's face flushed, a mixture of shame and panic. He looked away for a moment, shuffling papers nervously. The laughter he had so freely given earlier seemed to echo back at him, now a cruel reminder of his own arrogance. The customers in the bank, who had been watching quietly, leaned forward slightly, sensing the gravity of the moment. Whispers filled the air, curious and sympathetic, like a tide of silent judgment washing over him. Mrs. Carter continued, her voice unwavering. "Do you see this check, Mr. Thompson? This is not just a piece of paper. It represents hard work, responsibility, and courage. My daughter saved for it, planned for it, and earned it with integrity. And you," she said, gesturing to the manager, chose to dismiss all of that with your laughter. You may think it is small, but it is huge to her.
And it is huge to me. Aaliyah felt a wave of emotion rising inside her.
She had faced mockery and humiliation, but standing here with her mother by her side, she realized something powerful. Respect was not given by chance, it was earned by standing up, by confronting those who doubted her, and by holding her head high even when others tried to bring her down. Mr. Thompson finally opened his mouth, but his words came out weakly. I didn't mean... He stopped, realizing that excuses could not erase what he had done. Mrs. Carter raised a hand slightly, shaking her head. Intentions don't matter as much as actions, Mr. Thompson. What you did hurt my daughter, and it is your responsibility to recognize it and make amends. The manager swallowed hard. The weight of her words pressed on him like a physical force. He looked around, noticing the silent gazes of other customers for the first time. He saw the respect and pride shining in Aaliyah's eyes, and a pang of regret struck him sharply. He had laughed at someone who deserved nothing but admiration. Aaliyah felt a quiet strength rising within her, like a warm fire igniting in her chest. She was no longer just the girl who had been mocked. She was a young woman standing with her mother, strong and courageous, demanding dignity and respect. She knew that she had done nothing wrong. It was the arrogance of others that had tried to shame her. Mrs. Carter leaned down slightly, her voice softening, directed to her daughter. Hold on to your courage, Aaliyah. Always. No one has the right to belittle your effort, your dreams, or your heart. Aaliyah nodded, tears forming at the corners of her eyes, but not of sadness, of pride, relief, and an awakening sense of self-worth. Mr. Thompson's shoulders slumped. He looked at the check, then at the mother and daughter standing together, and realized that this small piece of paper had taught him a lesson far greater than any business transaction ever could. Respect, humility, and integrity were not optional. They were essential. And for the first time he truly understood what he had lost in his laughter. The air in the bank felt different now. What had begun as humiliation for Aaliyah was slowly transforming into a quiet moment of triumph. Mr. Thompson, the once smug manager, stood frozen behind the counter, unsure of what to do. The confidence he had carried into the morning seemed to have dissolved completely under the calm authority of Mrs. Carter and the quiet strength of her daughter. Aaliyah squeezed her mother's hand, drawing courage from the warmth and love she felt. She realized that the fear she had carried all morning was melting away, replaced by something far more powerful. Pride. Pride in her hard work, in her persistence, and in the unwavering support of her mother. Every chore she had done, every penny she had saved, every late night spent calculating her earnings, it had all led to this moment. Mrs. Carter looked directly at Mr. Thompson, her voice gentle but firm. Respect is not optional, she said. It is something earned, and it is something owed to those who work hard no matter their age, appearance, or background. My daughter earned your respect the moment she stepped into this bank, and you chose to mock her instead. The manager swallowed hard. He looked down at the check again as if seeing it for the first time. It was not just a piece of paper. It was proof of effort, determination, and integrity. And for the first time he felt the weight of what his laughter had done. Shame flushed through him, and he realized he had misjudged someone who was far stronger than he had imagined. Aaliyah, encouraged by her mother's words, found her own voice. I may be young, she said softly but clearly, and my check may be small to you, but every bit of it is mine. I earned it, and I deserve to be treated with respect. Her eyes met Mr. Thompson's, steady and unwavering. There was no anger in her gaze, only truth. The customers around the bank had grown quiet, sensing the change in atmosphere. Whispers turned to nods of approval, and a few faces reflected admiration. Aaliyah noticed them and felt a swell of confidence. For the first time she understood that courage was not about being loud or angry. It was about standing tall, speaking the truth and not allowing others to diminish your worth. Mr. Thompson finally found his voice. I apologize, he said slowly, his words heavy with sincerity. I was wrong to laugh at you. I did not consider how much effort this represents or how proud you should be. I am truly sorry. Aaliyah felt a mixture of relief and quiet triumph. The apology, though late, mattered. It was a recognition of her effort, her dignity, and her courage. She nodded at him, accepting the words without resentment, but also without forgetting the lesson he had inadvertently taught her. Not everyone would understand your value, but that did not mean you were any less valuable. Mrs. Carter smiled at her daughter, brushing a strand of hair behind Aaliyah's ear. See, she whispered. When you stand up for yourself, the world begins to notice. Respect is not given by fear or wealth. It is earned by courage and integrity. Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, pride, and quiet joy. She had faced mockery and condescension, and yet she had not broken. She had proven, first to herself and now to everyone in the bank, that strength was not measured by age or status, but by heart and determination. Mr. Thompson looked at the mother and daughter, feeling a lesson he would never forget. He had laughed at someone he thought was small, only to discover that real strength often comes in unexpected forms. And for Aaliyah, the laughter that had hurt her so deeply had transformed into a stepping stone, a moment that would forever remind her of her courage, her hard work, and the unwavering love of her mother. Aaliyah held her head a little higher as she stepped toward the exit. Her heart was lighter and her spirit stronger. She had faced humiliation, confrontation, and doubt, and she had emerged with her dignity intact. This was more than a small victory at the bank. It was a life lesson, one that would stay with her forever. The moment Aaliyah and her mother stepped out of the bank, the bright sunlight felt warmer, almost as if the world itself was celebrating their small victory. Aaliyah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the morning lift from her shoulders. The laughter, the mocking words, and the sting of humiliation were fading, replaced by something far more powerful: pride and courage. Mrs. Carter walked beside her daughter, her hand still gently holding Aaliyah's. You see, my dear, she said softly, the world may not always understand your worth. People will sometimes judge what they cannot comprehend. But never forget, your effort, your heart, and your determination are always valuable. And today you showed the world exactly that. Aaliyah nodded, her eyes shining with tears she could no longer hold back. She felt a mix of relief and joy, a strange but comforting warmth in her chest. I was so scared, Mom, she admitted quietly. I thought everyone was laughing at me and maybe I wasn't good enough. Her mother smiled and squeezed her hand. You were scared, yes. That's normal. But being scared does not mean you are weak. It means you are human. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is standing tall and moving forward even when fear is there. And you, Aaliyah, did exactly that. Aaliyah's gaze dropped to the check in her hand, now safe in her small wallet. To anyone else, it was just a piece of paper, but to her it was a symbol of perseverance, patience, and integrity. She remembered the countless hours she had spent earning it, every chore and tutoring session, every coin saved with determination. The check represented her journey, and she realized that no amount of laughter or mockery could diminish that journey. Mom, Aaliyah whispered, I feel stronger now, but I also feel different, like I've learned something bigger than just handling money. Her mother nodded knowingly. Yes, darling. You've learned that your value is not determined by others' opinions. You've learned that respect is earned, not demanded, and that the people who matter will see your heart even if others do not. And most importantly, you've learned that courage grows when you face challenges instead of running from them. As they walked down the sidewalk, Aaliyah felt the sunlight on her face and a new confidence in her step. She noticed the small things she had never paid attention to before, the way the leaves shimmered in the breeze, the laughter of children playing nearby, the smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery. Life felt bigger now, richer and filled with possibilities. She realized that her journey was only beginning, and that every challenge she faced would be an opportunity to grow stronger. Her mother looked at her, pride shining in her eyes. Never let anyone make you feel small, Aliyah. Not because of your age, your background, or the size of your check. What matters is your effort, your honesty, and your heart. Those are the things that define you, and nothing can take them away. Aliyah nodded, holding her mother's hand tightly. She felt a deep sense of connection, a bond strengthened by the day's events. The world outside was the same, but she herself had changed. She was no longer just the shy, uncertain girl who had walked into the bank that morning. She was a young woman with courage, dignity, and the quiet knowledge that she could face whatever came her way. As they reached home, Aliyah turned to her mother with a smile. "Thank you, Mom, for standing with me, for teaching me to be strong, and for believing in me." Her mother smiled back, her eyes glistening. "I will always believe in you, Aliyah. Today you proved not just to me but to yourself how powerful you really are," and in that moment, Aliyah felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of triumph and inner strength that no one could ever take away. The morning's humiliation had been transformed into a life lesson she would carry forever. A lesson of courage, respect, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughter. That evening, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Aliyah sat at her small desk in her room, carefully placing the check into her personal ledger. Each page of the ledger held her small victories, every chore completed, every coin saved, every lesson learned. But today's entry felt different. This check was more than money. It was proof of something far greater. Her courage, her perseverance, and her ability to stand tall in the face of disrespect. She ran her fingers over the smooth paper, remembering the morning at the bank. She remembered the sting of Mr. Thompson's laughter, the whispers of strangers, and the tight knot of fear in her chest. But she also remembered her mother walking in, her presence like a shield, her voice like a sword that cut through humiliation. That moment had changed everything. Aliyah realized that courage and respect were intertwined, and today she had discovered both in a single unforgettable experience. Her mother entered the room quietly, leaning against the doorway. "How are you feeling, my brave girl?" she asked, her eyes soft but full of pride. Aliyah smiled, a mixture of relief and quiet triumph on her face. "I feel strong, Mom, and proud. I was scared this morning, but now I feel like nothing can make me small again." Mrs. Carter nodded and walked over, sitting beside her daughter. She wrapped her arms around Aliyah in a gentle hug. "You've learned something very important today, Aliyah. Strength is not about never being scared. Strength is about standing up, even when your heart is racing, and showing the world that your worth cannot be defined by others' opinions." Aliyah leaned into her mother, tears of joy forming in her eyes. She felt a sense of peace she had never felt before. The bank, the manager, the laughter, they were all part of a moment that had tested her spirit. And she had passed that test. She had faced fear, embarrassment, and doubt, and had emerged with her dignity and pride intact. "I understand now," she whispered. "It's not the check itself that matters. It's what it represents, the hard work, the effort, and the courage to keep going no matter what anyone says." Her mother smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Aliyah's face. "Exactly. And remember this. One small victory can shape the way you see yourself for the rest of your life. You have faced a challenge and won. You have learned to value yourself, and no one can ever take that away from you." Aliyah took a deep breath and closed her ledger. She looked out the window at the darkening sky, feeling a sense of hope and determination. The world beyond her room was the same as it had been that morning, but she was no longer the same girl who had walked into that bank. She had grown stronger, braver, and wiser. She understood that respect was not something to be demanded, but something to be earned and recognized through courage and integrity. Later that night, as Aliyah lay in bed, she reflected on the events of the day. She thought of Mr. Thompson, who had laughed at her and underestimated her, and she realized that his mockery could no longer hurt her. Instead, it had become a lesson, one she would carry with her forever. She had learned that dignity, hard work, and the love and guidance of her mother were more powerful than any insult or moment of shame. Aaliyah drifted into sleep with a peaceful heart, the warmth of her mother's support surrounding her. She dreamed of the future, imagining the challenges she would face and knowing without a doubt that she had the strength to overcome them. The check was not just money, it was a symbol of triumph, a reminder that courage, respect, and perseverance could change the course of a day, and even a life. And in that quiet room, under the soft glow of the evening sky, Aaliyah felt unstoppable. She had been laughed at, underestimated, and tested, and she had won. The small girl who had walked into the bank that morning had transformed into someone ready to face the world with confidence, heart, and an unshakable sense of self-worth.